We're recording. Okay, great. I'll just give everyone a minute to get connected.
Is it a kind of community where you would recognize who's here?
There are definitely recognizable names.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, cool. So I feel that it must be a closely knit arts community in the city.
Yeah, I think so. Okay, I think we'll just get started, and people, I think, will continue trickling in. Some classes are still in session or just wrapping up. Welcome, everyone. For those who don't know me, my name's April Dean. I'm the gallery manager in the Department of Art and Design. I am pleased to open our lecture with a treaty acknowledgement. The University of Alberta respectfully acknowledges that we are situated on Treaty 6 territory, traditional lands of First Nations and Métis people. This is our third talk in the Visual Art and Design Speaker Series in the fall 2022 semester. This talk runs from 4 until 4:45 or 5 p.m. We'll aim for about 10 minutes of Q&A at the end. The talk is being recorded and we will upload to the Art and Design YouTube channel afterwards. Everyone has entered muted, and if you can stay muted during the lecture, it really helps everyone's audio. There is closed captioning enabled, so you should be able to turn that on. If you prefer it, there's a CC button in your Zoom controls at the bottom. You're welcome to use the chat function to add comment or question. You can also use the hand up, what is that called? Emoji. And then at the end in the Q&A, if you prefer to turn your camera on and unmute and ask questions with your face and voice, you're also welcome to do that. It is my great pleasure to introduce today's speaker. I just realized I was reading notes from last week, but they're the same notes, so we're in good shape. It's my great pleasure to introduce today's speaker, Sanaz Mazinani. Sanaz is an artist, educator, and curator based in Toronto. Working across disciplines, Mazinani creates projects that invite a rethinking of how we see. Her multidisciplinary practice invites critical reflection and forefronts social justice and environmental movements. Mazinani is an assistant professor of studio art in the Department of Arts, Culture, and Media at UTSC, with a graduate appointment at the Daniels Faculty of Architecture, Landscape, and Design at the University of Toronto. Mazinani's work has been written about in Art Forum, ArtNet News, Canadian Art, San Francisco Chronicle, Washington Post, among others. She's received grants from the Canada Council, Zellerbach Family Foundation, and National Endowment for the Arts. And her work is held in public collections, including the Art Gallery of Ontario, the Cleveland Museum of Art, and the City and County of San Francisco. I had the pleasure of learning about Sanaz's work as it's been selected for a major public art commission here in Edmonton. And although we won't get any visual previews, I think it's really exciting to learn more about Sanaz's practice in that context. So I will stop sharing so that you can then share your screen, and I'll pass it over to you, Sanaz.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, April. And just before I share, I wanted to just say hello to everyone. Hi. Thank you for being here. Thank you, April, for inviting me. I'm really excited to be speaking to your students and to be invited into your community. So I'm going to begin with also a land acknowledgement, and specific to Toronto, which is where I'm based out of right now. So I reside here, and Toronto is land that is territory of the Anishinaabe nation covered by Treaty 13 and signed with the Mississaugas of the Credit and other indigenous peoples. These include the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and now continue to be the home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people. I am eternally thankful for the many thousands of years of stewardship of this land under the dish with one spoon Wampum Belt Covenant, which allows us to be here today. I stand in solidarity with Indigenous sovereignty. We are here today and far from my native land due to the deep and systemic forces of colonialism, which has extracted my country's resources and destabilized our region for oil and power. My family immigrated to Canada in 1988 from Iran when I was just nearing the end of my 10 years. As a young person going to school, I encountered many people who'd never heard the name of my language or the name of my country. And so I quickly felt a connection to my BIPOC friends. And today I bring this awareness to the context on this land. Thank you again. And I will attempt to talk about my work now. And please, if you have any questions at all, feel free to stop me and ask a question. I can kind of monitor a chat now, I think. Or maybe April can give me a holler out, but we don't need it to be like just me speaking the entire time. Okay, so to do this, I gotta put the Zoom screen over and this guy over and share, and hopefully it will work. Does it work? Do you guys see the screen with my
Looks great.
name?
Yeah, you've got it.
Okay, good. So this is my first slide, right? Okay, great. So welcome, Layla. So I want to begin with a brief introduction about my work in general, and specifically talk afterwards about 5 different projects that deal with the power of images, and how this kind of what this means to me. So I'm just gonna do a little move over my camera. Okay. So I've worked in photography, video art, sound, installation, and sculpture, and even a scent piece over the last 2 decades. However, one really significant element that's reappeared in my projects and has been a thread in my practice overall, even though I use different media, is the subject of photography itself. So I'm especially interested in how we can think about the photographic medium, not just as an image, but as a site of information, of data, and a place where our understanding of the world can be born out of. So next, I moved here from Iran, and I mentioned that. So I wanted to start with this little bit of introduction to myself, but it also informs the way that I came to be interested in photography. So I was moved to think about the power of images on my first trip back as a 15-year-old. And you can see these are pictures of me from that trip. I visited for the summer, and I found the experience about when I returned back to Canada to be quite difficult to deal with. So I'd moved and I hadn't visited for 4 years and got to go back again after this like 4-year period. And if you can imagine, from being 10 or 11 to 15, there's a lot of growing that takes place in that time. And I was spending all of that in Windsor, Ontario, which was at the time about 200,000 people, a small community. So when I came back, I began to tune into the way that I was being perceived all along in Canada. And and I realized that the kind of racial slurs that were, I experienced as a teenager uh, through a different kind of understanding. And it dawned on me that the way that I was being treated was based on certain assumptions about who I was that had nothing to do with the encounters with me. So then I was like, well, what is this being based on? And I slowly start to realize that it was based on the representation of what my culture was in the popular media, in news media, in in the imagery that was being circulated about me. And this is when I was like, oh, maybe I can do something about this. And so I realized that photography has this intense ability to tell a story and to transport you to somewhere you've never been geographically, spatially, or to somewhere you've never been temporally, so going back through time. And this kind of simultaneous ability was for me then also unpacked with its limitation. So, what is being left outside? What is not being told? What is being kind of censored, perhaps? Just as a little side note that you can spot here, I used to have a little rat tail as a 15-year-old. Shh, don't tell anyone else. Okay, so the first project that I started was actually upon my next trip back to Iran, where I was like, okay, I need to start taking pictures of this, of what this country is to me, and how, maybe I can share them in a way that would present the alternative perspective. So I'm just going to show you a few pictures from a collection of about 300 images that I started making when I was about, I guess, 20 years old. The photographs have kind of three main functions for me. One is that they became a tool for me to navigate my own culture, because by this time I was also an outsider in Iran. And so having this camera with me allowed me like a way to like create a pathway to experience the world again. I titled the project Iran Revisited for that reason. The second important factor for me was that the accumulation of images would allow for me to share an alternative perspective of what I was seeing, and not particularly what was sensational or would want to be published. Often, when I was doing this work, I would get calls from newspaper editors and stuff and ask me, like, would you have any pictures of like really angry women in the streets? No, I didn't see any of that when I was there. So I was trying to create this alternative um, narrative. So these are the pictures, and in addition to the alternative narratives, I wanted to show the complexity. So I wanted to show how not everyone in Iran is the same, and that there is this like beautiful diversity within the culture. I wanted to show the softness, the warmth, and the intellect of the people. And this one picture is when I visited the nomads in central Iran, and they invited me for tea, and that's like a hand woven, a woolen um, carpet that they made, and specifically they used goat fur for it. This is an image of my friend Mahshid in a villa by the Caspian Sea in northern Iran. And this is a picture of a taxi driver I took in central, like in Tehran, um, who was also a poet. And what one of the things that I wanted to like create with this image was to um, offer a spot where I could start to talk about my country based on my own experiences. So, for example, in Iran, when you take a taxi, you always sit in the front. Because you want to talk to the person who's driving you. So there's this kind of change in like, or a kind of respect in that kind of system of rider and driver that exists there. And additionally, if you were to see someone else walking by carrying bags, you would often like just stop and say, "Hey, we're going in this direction. Would you like a lift?" And so, kind of like, I don't know if you guys have Lyft in April. Do you guys have Lyft in? Yeah. So it's like the share function basically has been there like for as long as there's been taxis in Iran. So overall, I think this one last image that I'll show from the project kind of qualifies that experience for me in that people of different kinds of uh, relationships with religion or with the hijab would still be conversing and existing under the same roof. So these are cousins who are just having a chat about whatever it was, like the restaurant they went to last time. But of course, you can see that their dress is quite different, and you can see me in the mirror there. So yeah, um, and so this was kind of the beginning for me of working with images as a source. What I did next actually came out of my time in grad school. I went to Stanford for my graduate work. Is there anyone here who's from grad school today? You think? Maybe put your hand up with the emoji if you are. I'm curious. Okay.
I don't see any
All right. Okay. So
of
it's
our
mostly.
MFA students.
Okay. So it's more. Okay. So, but it's good to know. Like, so basically, when I was in my MFA program, I was photographing still. But at the time, this was like 2010, um, social media was kind of still in a way really new. And so a lot of people were talking about the way that images were being circulated online. And I started thinking about what is the way, how are we affected by the way that an image, a single picture, moves through the networks of our social media and connectivity? How does that image change the how we feel about it if we see it like 10 times versus one time versus 100 times? Do we trust it more? Do we like it more? How does that picture change with the way it gets consumed by us? Here's an installation shot of the work that came out of my master's program. And the sources of the images were not my own anymore. I had started collecting pictures from the onset of the Iraq War in 2003. And at that time, I had this kind of crazy archive collection of about 60,000 images that were just like on my hard drive. They weren't taking up too much space because they were all low resolution files that I was just downloading. And I thought, well, I mean, I've been collecting these for a while. What's fascinating me with this kind of circulation of these images? And so I started looking at what our relationship is to this kind of photographs that we encounter online. And specifically, as you can see here, I was interested in looking at images that had to do with war outside of the US. I was living in the US for the first time, right? So I had just moved. And so this was also a big question for me. And so this is a picture from 2011 when I was doing my research. And I wanted to continue showing it, even though it's very dated now, because it kind of informs what I was thinking at the time, right? So previous to the digital world taking over as it has, um, the Library of Congress in the US was the largest holder of images. And in 2011, this was the proportional difference between the two. What was really interesting for me is to think about, well, how do we understand the world based on these kinds of pictures? Um, and I'm sorry, I'm just opening up the chat because I saw a couple of messages in there. So in 2019, this was just a couple of years ago, about 250 billion photos had been uploaded to Facebook. And that statistic, I have not seen the newest update on it, but it did say also that that included 136,000 images every minute being added. So I guess you could do the math if you wish. Um, Furthermore, this is one that kind of shows that the increase in images overall. So right now, the estimate of the population of the world is 7.75 billion people. And out of that 7.75, 6.6 billion have smartphones. And it's estimated that about 230 pictures are taken per person per year. It's a really low estimation, but I guess it depends on where you live, right? So that takes us to 2022 at over 1.5 trillion images taken per year. And these statistics for me are kind of staggering. And I really wonder how this affects the way that we consume and experience pictures. So going back to 2009 and 10, when I'm making this work, I started really thinking about how that image circulates digitally. How does it move through this kind of virtual space? For example, if I have a friend in Iran, will I get more images about the protests happening in Iran than if I don't? And what happens if I have certain leanings politically? Do I get more of these images? And how does this affect my relationship to that site or that place without seeing pictures of it? Is it on my mind or not? And to conclude, this is what the work ended up being coming out of these questions for me. I wanted to make an artwork that demonstrated this kind of webbed pattern of like exchange. In a way, I was imagining each kind of central point in these patterns to be a node, maybe a node of a hub where that information would then like kind of pivot out of. This piece is called Together We Are. And what was also interesting for me was to create an alternative experience for the viewer from looking at it from far away to looking at it from close up. So I wanted to visualize the transmission of images to represent the networks and the nodes of connections, but also to put images together in a repeated format to draw attention to how these pictures exist online and how their repetition can result in the value that we give them. For example, if we see one image repeated multiple times, does this impact the truth value which we imbue to that image? And here is it a little bit closer up. In this work, I have two bodies together. Both are women and they're both in the act of removing their clothes. Can anyone guess who this might be? Put it in the chat if you can guess any of the two figures. Okay, so should I tell you? Can anyone guess? Yay! Okay, Marilyn, you got it. Yes, Paris Hilton. So the other woman is unnamed. I've never been able to find who she is. But what was interesting for me, thank you, was that Paris Hilton is wearing white, while the other woman in the headscarf is wearing black. I also thought that they are so different from each other, right? The values or what they stand for is obviously not the same thing. And so there kind of there's polarity. But one of the reasons that I called the piece Together We Are and put these two images together was that I actually thought there was a connection between the two, a really important one in terms of what I wanted to talk about. And this was that no matter what they stand for, they is this kind of singular way that they can be consumed or presented. So we don't really think of like the personality of Paris Hilton as someone who's complex, or that there's not that much nuance to who they are when they're presented in a single image online, right? And in the same way, this woman is not. And the woman, I don't know if you can tell, but she actually was caught wearing a belt of dynamite. So she's actually a suicide. She was going to be a suicide bomber who wasn't able to kind of enact her will, let's say. And so she was caught, and this is actually a mugshot of her. And so what I think was really interesting, even though these people are singular in or very different, is the fact that they are probably quite complex, and there's more to them than that one image. So this, to me, kind of became a flag for the limitation of the photographic. This is the work and display. And what was really important for me is to come up with this design where the work is coming off the wall, so that when you stood in front of it, it became more sculptural. And so you could actually kind of see the whole pattern covering your peripheral vision, to speak to this kind of unendingness of kind of the layers of connectivity and social media. Here's another piece from the same series. This one's titled State Prism, and I'll show you the close-up of it. This one was taken from censored photographs made by staff photographers for the Department of Defense in the US. And I gained access to these source images through the Freedom of Information Act. There was a professor named Ralph Bellentier who in 2005 was able to actually get them released. And this 700 images were, I used them for my source. And I wanted to use censored images to talk about what happens when an image is information, most significant information is removed. What is the documentary merit of a photographic image? So when the faces or name tags, or in this case, you can see this dark, the larger piece at the very end, the location that they're coming out of, which was either an armored vehicle or a plane, is all removed, does that photograph still have value? And what happens when information is censored? Why is information censored? And why are we not giving the right space and time to discuss this kind of loss of life? I know it's a little heavy. So this next piece is called Redacted March. And I really wanted to incorporate a mirror into the work, so that when you're looking at it, you're standing in front of it, you could see yourself in the artwork at the same time. And for me, I was thinking that that would kind of involve the viewer to think about their own position when it comes to this kind of global politics. In this piece, the detail, I've inverted the color so you can see that the coffins are kind of green and black. And it's paired up with a young man taking a self-portrait of himself, but he's wearing army fatigues. And so these relationships for me were kind of important to show um, how this kind of virtual space can inform our intellect or our understanding of something else. Um, Sometimes the pieces are a little lighter, but again, these were all had to do with conflict and war. So these are called, this piece was called Blue Angels, and it's simply this kind of beautiful pattern of these kind of blue angel military planes endlessly um, just in our sky, right? Here's another one. I made this corner piece. I always love making corner pieces for some reason. And this is an image taken from an instructional guide for children on how to draw different things such as cats and dogs and helicopters, and the last one was a stealth bomber. So of course I had to grab that one. And this is the last piece I'm going to show you from this project. It's called Explosion, and again, it incorporated a mirror in it. It was very hard for me to stand somewhere to take this picture without having me in the picture. So I hope you can see that there's glass in there. And I actually got tinted mirror, so it's actually a bronze colored mirror. Does anyone have any thoughts so far? You guys want to wait till the end? You usually wait till the end, right?
I mean, if people have questions, they can absolutely.
Okay.
Sanaz, are the patterns that you've used,
Yeah.
do they have specific context?
Yeah, for sure. So I mentioned that I'm from Iran. So if you imagine like Persian carpets or architecture with the mosaic work, this is called Islamic ornamentation. And you know, my research is layered, so I'm not going too far into it. However, the reason I wanted to use pattern is because it did kind of represent this kind of mode of like networks, like places like where 5 or 6 lines come together and merge, and then the information leaves from it. But also in Iranian literature and in the iconography of Islamic ornamentation, it's represented in a way to allow you to meditate. So it's kind of like a mandala would be. So your eye falls into it, and you kind of are encouraged to meditate, go elsewhere, have a spiritual experience, which is why often it's used in church mosques, right? But for me, I wanted to use it in a more secular way to think about this like potential to go elsewhere, to kind of move beyond the now, to imagine a better world. So it's for me a way of bringing the poetic into these patterns to think about how one can move beyond what is now. So still in a meditative way, but to imagine something more um, futuristic, I guess. Yeah, that's a really good question. Thank you. Oh, that's the detail of it. And so I'm going to just show you another iteration of this pattern work. I'm going to go through this really quickly, but I want to show you this one specifically because it uses similar sources where I started, just had one piece with the planes in the sky. And then now I'm making several of these because I realized that I was really interested in the way that our natural space, our like open airway, air um, can be changed when there's a military craft flying overhead. And so this one is actually made out of scrolls. They're printed images printed on silk. And here's another one. I was really interested in kind of pulling the beautiful and the tragic together. And so the sources for these images are all from promotional photography for big companies that sell military planes, such as Lockheed Martin. And so this one in particular was this amazing shoot where the plane is kind of going over the Andes. And it's kind of amazing how great the photography actually is. Here's another one with thunderbirds flying in formation. And that's the full pattern for it. And so I've been making this work for a while, and in 2018 I was invited by a museum in Toronto and the Contact Photography Festival to create an installation for their kind of open space. And so at that point I started to translate these pictures into kind of very long scrolls. These are about like 90 feet long. so that when you walked beneath them, you kind of had this feeling of the sky filled with fighter jets. This is the F-22 Raptor, and the picture is it breaking the sound barrier. The palette for me was really important as well, because for me it kind of signals some kind of transition in time. And speaking to an audience that is kind of thinking about how I make my decisions, I should talk about this because a lot of what I do is very aesthetic. I'm really interested in kind of um, getting the viewer to be interested in my work. And once they are interested, I start to talk about more kind of not as fun, maybe, subjects. But what happens is that the artwork ends up creating a space for this dialogue to exist within. So if you saw just a straight up picture of a F-18 Hornet, no, yeah. But when it's kind of part of a larger work that is artistic and maybe poetic and maybe confusing and all those things at once, there's so many opinions that can be brought up and there's so many ideas that can be shared about it. And for that reason, I actually started really feeling excited about public art, because the public artwork allows the viewer to engage with the work without going into a museum. And so that threshold of getting into a museum it limits your audience in a certain way. And I was really interested in how I can um, continue to make art, but for like wider, more varied, and more diverse audience. Which brings me to a project that I recently completed in San Francisco. It's a set of public art works for the city of San Francisco titled Rolling Reflection. And it's 20 sculptures made out of stainless steel. And I worked on this project for 3 years. And basically, essentially, there are these rock formations that look like they might have been cut through. And so their flat sides are always mirrored and reflective so that you can see yourself within it. But when you walk along it, you kind of experience these rock formations. The colors are actually really important in this case. And again, things for me, colors often, the variation of color is one of the ways I um, use representation of transition of time. So for me, the mid-tone blues are like high noon when the sky is bright blue, just like the background in your picture, April. And then so on one side is the dawn, the colors of dawn, and on the other side are the warmer colors of sunset. And so this was positioned, the street in this walkway in San Francisco goes east to west. So I had them kind of positioned in this way. So you would start walking and it would be almost like the walking through a day's worth of light experiences. But also the same cross section, the vertical heights of the sculptures were representative of the elevation cross section of the city of San Francisco. And the reason that I was thinking about these and these were really important for me was that this site is the location of the Planning Commission of the city of San Francisco. So all the workers who work there are part of imagining the future of the city and what it would look like. So I thought it would be nice if the artwork responded to the city itself. The other element is that for me, in a way, this work has a lot to do with the image in photography too. In the way that you would see yourself pictured as you walk by the sculptures in downtown San Francisco. I think that a lot of what we talk about with photography is who's taking the photograph, who's being pictured, and who is being left out of these images of who we are. And with this project, no matter who you are, you can get to see yourself within the center of the city. So you are basically, your body is reflected and you become aware of your significance in space. And what's also really fun is that there's moments where you can see yourself multiple times. So it's kind of exciting to take pictures. As you can see on the right there, I can see this woman being reflected multiple times. So my question was, what happens when you see yourself reflected in public space? And is there a way to make an artwork that can create a platform for empowerment so that the project can encourage a reconfiguring of the perception of who you are and how visible you are into the future of that location? Me visiting the installation with my family, and I just wanted to include it because I was so excited when I finally got to go see it, since this project was actually installed during the pandemic without me, although I was there like every step of the way by video, which was kind of nuts. But I was really thankful to an amazing architect friend of mine, the Massomer, who was able to step in for me for this installation. And that's it. I do, as you can, oh, I guess you can't see. I have more projects that I can show that are more in the public art space, but I think it's a good time to stop now and take some questions, and then I can start sharing my screen again, if that makes sense. I'd like to hear from some people.
Thank you, Sanaz. It was really great to see some of that earlier photographic work.
Yeah.
Happy to open up to questions if folks want to hop in the chat, raise a hand, or you're very welcome to just unmute and ask questions.
I think, does any, okay, I'll ask a question. Who makes photography in this group? Who makes photographs? You can just maybe put it in the chat or unmute and say me. Okay, no one's a photographer. Who is a painter in this group? Oh, wait, kind of. Okay.
Kind of, yeah.
You got a kind of.
And
okay.
Then Tammy is representing an entire class of media art students that she's in right now. So there's definitely some photographers in there.
Okay.
Sure. Yeah.
And then what about painters? Are there any painters here? No? Yes, maybe thinking about it. I paint. Okay, Ellie paints. And, oh, Eli.
Tammy says all the painters here. Yeah, great.
Okay. And what about sculpture? Who does sculpture? Who makes sculptures? So how is it that multiple people are watching me? Am I being streamed through Tammy?
I think that is the case. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, somebody there's got to have a question. How many people are there, Tammy?
She's protecting you. There's 14.
Please. Hi. Hi.
Hi there. Thank you for your presentation. Sorry, I'm on two screens. There you go. That's better. I do have a question about the shift in your work and the process. Like I imagine when you're working on the photographic works that you're in control. You're really in control of every step of the process, and then doing public artwork that then you become part of a much larger team and then maybe some of that control is lost. And so I don't know how that.
I do not like the control so much. Yeah, so that's a great question. Yeah, I mean, I'm a bit of a perfectionist, so like even with like mounting the photographs that go on 4 panels, like I had to train the people who mounted it for me because it was like down to the millimeter. Because if the images don't line up even by a millimeter, it just kind of breaks that feeling in the center. There are 4 separate panels. So the lining up, that's the, yeah. And then with the sculpture, you're absolutely right. I mean, I'm not pouring the stainless steel. Like that was done at a place that makes airplane parts as well as art sculpt. So I was not there. It happened during the pandemic. It happened in the US. I was in Toronto. So, there's like, I do have to allow everyone to do what they're best at. So that's the wonderful part, is that if I'm working with someone who does the work better than me, then I don't have to worry about it. But I think in terms of like the level that the fabrication happened for me, I really imagined something, and somehow miraculously after um, I actually imagined this project something like 14 years ago, and then I pitched it and I got it, and then it took me like 3 years to make it happen. But I have to say that that sculpture is it like really was the way I imagined it. Um, like I was wowed when I thought, like it felt like my brain was outside of my head. So that was really amazing. Although the location of each one and the experience of walking through it had to change dramatically from what I wanted, um, because we had to really be very careful with um, ADA regulations, which was if anyone has low visibility issues, if light gets reflected into the mirror and back into their eye, they would like more dramatically like be temporarily blinded, just like we like anyone with good vision would, but it would be more significant. So we had to do all these light ray studies and make sure that at whatever point in an annual in a year, that the direct light would never reflect back in the eye level of someone who's from 6 feet to down to in a wheelchair. So for that, we had to change the rotation of a lot of the work. So the experience of walking through it really had to shift from what I had originally imagined. Sorry, that was a really long answer.
Well, thank you. And can I ask? Can I ask? Squeeze in one more question. I see there's others coming up into the chat, which is about like the multiplicity of the image and the kind of refraction of it, and whether that's kind of, or is that part of contemporary culture as well? A comment upon that and.
Yeah. Yeah, no, okay. I just want to go back to that early question. I just want to say that the outcome was great in the end. It was just like there's things that I learned in the process that I wouldn't have thought about before. So there was growth for me, and that's where those changes occurred than what I originally wanted. So, in terms of the reflection of images, you mean in the sculptures or in my
In
photo?
both. In both.
Hmm. So I write a little bit about the mirror itself, and when humans first experienced the full-length mirror, which was basically, if you think about Versailles and like that era of finally being able to produce these large-scale mirrors, it was the first time that humans were seeing their full body being reflected. Because previous to that, you would see it in like a pocket mirror, like all the way to Egyptian times, right? Or like your reflection in the body of water. So I think there was like a really important like fissure in when the image of you is no longer the way you imagine yourself in your brain, but actually external to you. And now external to you through self-portraits and selfies and social media, like extensively, right? So when you ask a question about refraction, you know, I think that maybe for me, and I really haven't thought about this before, so this is off the cuff. Like for me, this multiplicity kind of extends from that interest of like um, the way that a single image can never express the fullness of reality. And so maybe fractions or fragments can come together to create a larger whole. I don't know. I think
Yeah.
that might be it, though. I love it. I'm going to write that down.
Interesting. I keep thinking about it too. Thank you
What
so
do
much
you
for the
think? Do you think that could
presentation.
work? Like, do you see that?
Yeah, like I think it's so interesting to have this the images repeated and almost like in a kaleidoscopic way, and then they become a whole, as you say,
Hmm.
and create a completely different reading
Hmm.
in a way that the single image never could.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. But maybe never a whole, because I like that's, I think, the reality of it for me.
Yeah, it's really interesting to think about. There's like yeah, a confusion of identity or like a multiplicity in understanding identity too that's happening, I think, without like pulling apart and bringing things back together. Yeah.
Yeah, I can maybe share this one other project that I made really quickly.
Yeah.
That wasn't part of my slide deck, but in this project, I really tried to do this. I'm just showing you 3 pictures of it, but this was the installation. Um, and it was a sculpture with wall pieces and a video and 5-channel sound work. And then, but, well, where is my, uh-oh, I lost my scroll options. Oh, sorry. Did you see the other picture? Sorry, I don't know what happened. But I was really thinking about what you're saying in that context.
There are 2 questions in the
Yeah,
chat.
sure.
There's one from Eli that asks, what material were the 90-foot banners made from? And what was the process of getting those made?
Sure, 100%. I just wanted to show you these ones really quickly. So that's kind of that refraction was really important in this one. Okay, I am going to answer your question. So those were printed on fabric. I made my first set on silk, and they were not flowing properly. So we ended up using a kind of fake silk, like a polyester that was designed to feel and look like silk and have the translucency of light like silk. In fact, I can just grab I'll be right back. Let me just grab something to show you. Okay. So this is it. Let me just sit down. this is a sample of it. And so this is the front side, and the back side, you can see, is not as like you would. It really has one side to it, but the great thing is that light goes through it. So this helps. This is actually what we printed. Just a little sample, or a large sample. They made me really big samples. I don't know why.
That's great. Thank you. One more question in the chat is from Grace. Do you see a difference in the public reception of your art once it becomes a public art piece?
Grace, can you ask that question in a different way? I don't know what you mean.
Sure. Just you did a lot of explaining of like how you came to this, and obviously the public may have a chance to kind of read up on the work you've done, but making it such a public piece, do you find maybe the meaning is either lost, or do you find people interact with it in maybe a different way than you had expected, or just kind of any other like observations you have of having such a public work area or a public piece in such a like open environment?
That's a really good question. So I definitely make the work so that it has, I call it multiple points of entry, in that like people can kind of get what they wish out of it, but there's always more for someone who wants to know more. And I also thought I'm making work that people who live in the buildings next door, and people who go to work like 9 to 5 every day would really want to enjoy. I wanted it to be like a happy, like colorful, but also like kind of contemplative space. It's very, very gray in that walkway. So like right from the beginning, when we were talking about with the architects, we were like, let's go with something that has a nice color punch. So like there's some things that are kind of quite rudimentary in my decision making. And then there's stuff that is like more complex, because half of the building, there's like hundreds of people in that building who know the city in and out, because they are like landscape architects and urban planners. And for them, it was really meaningful to have a public artwork that was about what their passion is and what they work on 9 to 5 every day. So I wanted there to be something like that. But if someone's coming by and just walking by, they're just going to be like, whoa, is that a rock? Or is that like what is that? And they'll probably just take a selfie because they like the way they look that day. So for me, like all types of interactions are valuable. Yeah, I hope that's an answer. That explains you. Does that explain? Yeah, okay. I'm still waiting for a question from the 14 people.
Tammy, no pressure. Any questions from your class?
Well, is Tammy a student?
No, Tammy is the instructor.
Okay.
And so she's got you
Okay.
in her classroom on a projector for her students. No pressure. What made you decide to move to sculpture?
Okay, that's a good one. So I made this project in Washington, DC, and I was invited to be part of this festival, kind of like, actually it was like a biennial, that is no more. And I was given this like old abandoned building that had these like amazing large windows, and I wanted to make the whole building into a light box. So it was kind of a crazy project, I have to say. We had to clean all the windows, and then I made like kind of like this, what I showed Eli, but like in print, but still so it would be see-through, so light can go through it, on Duratrans photographic paper. And we stuck it all to all the windows. And inside, I went to the Home Depot and I bought like large fluorescent lights and like made a back like light box inside each one, so that at night it would light up, and it was awesome. But the best part of that project was while I was installing on the street, and people would come up to me and they'd be like, what are you making? What is this all about? And I got to like talk to so many people, and so many people that I would never see inside of a gallery. You know, it was kind of very interesting too, because I was also doing patterns for this project, and some of the community members recognized it as Islamic patterns. And you know, I'd see people like running up and being like, it's not going to be a mosque, is it? Like, oh no, like our like community is going to be ruined. And I would be like, actually, why would you think that it would be a mosque? Like, and they were like, well, it looks like the patterns from like the Middle East or something. And I would get this chance to talk to them, and I'm like, well, you know, these are patterns from that region, but they're not directly linked to religion. Like they're the way that the art looks like there. And so it was just like this really valuable experience for me to talk to people that I, you know, wouldn't get a chance to like have that opportunity in a gallery space. You know, a gallery space has so much to do with commerce, whereas like the public space doesn't really. There's just an openness to it. And so from when I finished that project, I was like, I need to look for my next like public art project, because I hadn't even realized that the effect of public art until I made that work. And so yeah, I was just moved by my art. Like I just love the public audience as my audience. Doesn't mean that I don't do gallery work. I just want to have like a larger breadth of who I make work for and with and stuff.
That's an incredibly thoughtful response. Thanks for that, Sanaz. And here in Edmonton or Amisquichy, Waskagan, we will have our own Sanaz Mazinani public art eventually, right? So there's a new project, Warehouse Park in the core of our downtown, and Sanaz has a major commission from the Edmonton Arts Council and City of Edmonton for that park.
I'm so excited. I was going to come out this summer, but it was too early, and it was just like there's nothing there, so it didn't make sense to come out. But I'm going to come out for the, I'm going to forget the name of your festival, the Create Works Festival.
The Works Festival, yeah,
in July.
Yeah.
So I'm planning to come out for that, so that I can do a site visit, but also maybe put a booth or table and show like the ideas and the maquettes and the models and stuff like that.
Right.
And,
please keep in touch so we
can
know. Unless there are any last minute questions, I think maybe we will, it's 5:04, we'll wrap. It's even later for Sanaz, so
no worries. I'm happy to answer any.
I just want to say thank you for such an insightful, beautiful talk, and everyone wants to yell hi.
Thank you.
That was really nice.
You're actually here.
I love it. Wow.
Thanks for that. Thanks, Tammy.
Can I see the students, Tammy? Yeah. Hi. Oh, weird. I see myself and you. Okay, really well, great. Hopefully you guys will, thank you so much. And I would love to come by and maybe see your gallery or something like that when I'm in town.
Yes, please. Please keep in touch. We'll be so happy to host you when you are here. For those still here, just a brief reminder, we still have 2 VADF speakers in November. So Cynthia Sifa Malanga is November 16th, and Claudine Janishen is November 30th. More information will be in your inboxes soon about those speaker engagements. Sanaz, what a pleasure. Thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us today. It was really great.
Take care. Thank you. Take care. Thank you to everyone and all the professors and teachers who are there. Yay.
Thank you. Have a great evening.
Good night.
Bye.